Hey folks, it's Dave Neal, stand-up comic and host of the Rush Hour podcast. We have a dedicated video today regarding the Candace Owens versus Brigitte Macron lawsuit. Brigitte Macron, the First Lady of France, suing Candace Owens for something like 21 counts of defamation. It's a big deal. Now, last week I said, listen, I don't want to follow the Candace Owens docuseries about Brigitte Macron being secretly born a man. It felt icky to me. A lot of folks responded saying, how the hell are you going to cover this defamation suit if you don't consume the content? I agreed with them, and that video actually went viral over the weekend. We got something like 1,500 new subscribers. Hello, how are you? So I've decided to watch the entire docuseries from Candace's perspective, sharing what she claims, it was evidence that was given to her. But now we've got an over 200-page document by Brigitte Macron's lawyers that offer evidence, including things like a birth certificate, a birth announcement, I should say, and we're going to present that. Now, you might say, Dave, what's your opinion? Everyone wants to know, what side are you on? I'm not playing that game. I'm not there yet. I'm about 75% done with Candace Owens' docuseries. Now, just give me some time, all right? There's a lot of information to get through. So we will be interviewing defamation lawyers. We'll be talking about people that have been in defamation lawsuits. And if you don't know me, 2 years ago, I was actually threatened with like $120 million defamation suit. I was sued for harassment, all while as a journalist, I was exposing a scam that was going on where a lady was faking pregnancies, cancer, and a whole bunch of other things. Her last name was Owens, Laura Owens, a different Owens, from a different family. But just so you guys know, I have a little experience as a non-legal person dealing with defamation, in the sense that I had to make sure I was covering my bases and proving what I was saying was true. And I was able to do that, as Laura Owens ended up getting charged with 7 counts of felonies. So brush some dirt off your shoulder there. We did a great job. Our community, the Justice for Clayton community, if you didn't hear about it, it's being turned into a documentary. So I say all of that just to say, I'm no expert, but some people on the internet think I offer an opinion that is fair and just, and I'm going to try my best to do that. Now, is that to say I believe Brigitte Macron and I don't believe Candace? We'll get there. I'm not sure what I believe. And I want to live in a world, and I think we should all live in a world, where we can have grace and patience for people to figure it all out. So, of course, what I did was ask ChatGPT. Now, leave a comment if ChatGPT is getting any of this wrong. But for those that haven't followed Candace Owens' claims, I just want to share them briefly right here. Here's why Candace Owens is being sued by Brigitte Macron and French President Emmanuel. On July 23rd and 24th of 2025, the Macrons filed a 218-page defamation lawsuit in Delaware Superior Court against Owens, accusing her of spreading a series of verifiably false and devastating lies. Now, here's my question for you guys out there. Do you want me to do a live stream where I read the entire 200-plus page suit? It would probably take 3 or 4 hours. If you want to be a part of that, hit the subscribe button and let me know. If we get 500 new subscribers on this video, I will read it. I just want to see if there's a market for that, because it'll take a good amount of time. Here's what the lawsuit alleges. False claims about Brigitte Macron. Owens alleged Brigitte was born male under the name Jean-Michel Trogneux, transitioned in her 30s, and later assumed her sister's identity. Additional conspiracy claims. Brigitte and Emmanuel are accused of being blood relatives engaged in incest. Emmanuel Macron was allegedly installed as president via a CIA mind control program, such as MKUltra. Motivation of fame and profit. The complaint claims the charges were used to promote Owens' Becoming Brigitte podcast series, monetizing her platform, including merchandise like a fake Time Man of the Year t-shirt, and attracts attention. Ignored retraction requests. The Macron sent 3 separate legal demands starting December in 2024 through July of 2025 for Owens to retract her statements. They said she refused and doubled down instead. Legal context. Under U.S. law, public figures must prove actual malice, that Owens either knew her statements were false or acted with reckless disregard. The lawsuit includes 22 counts of defamation, false light, and related claims, and seeks punitive damages, a jury trial, and court orders to stop further dissemination. Now, after watching the first 5 episodes of Candace Owens' docuseries, I will say, as the audience, we're forced to believe a lot of what Candace is saying, in the sense that she'll say a lot of things but not show the work. Now, she does show a lot of the photos that are involved, and a lot of it is isn't it odd that this photo looks like Emmanuel Macron, but it's actually someone from Brigitte's side? You get a lot of that. That doesn't work in court, right? You're going to have to get much more definitive evidence. But Candace Owens doesn't have to necessarily prove that Brigitte Macron was born a man. She's going to have to prove that that's what she believed. But I'm going to show you that, with all of the bandwidth of everything Candace Owens related, I mean, she's covered this for a long time now. She doesn't have to slip up 100% of the time, just 1% of the time, right? If she made any statements that weren't alleging or weren't, I believe, then that's where she's going to be in trouble. And again, defamation is different in the United States than it is in France. But we do have Brigitte Macron's attorney here, and I believe this is the attorney that worked in the Dominion case against Fox News that won them $750 million. So this is not your rinky-dink lawyer here. These people know what they're doing. But again, it's very hard to prove defamation. So let's just have a listen to what they have to say.
Just posted a video reacting to the lawsuit. She calls it a, quote, obvious and desperate public relations strategy. What's your response?
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank her for that reaction to the lawsuit. She's only helping us with our claim for punitive damages by expressing no remorse and obviously doubling down on these falsehoods. But I don't think she's going to feel the same way about this being a public relations stunt after her deposition and after she has to sit for trial.
Now, here's what's interesting. Candace Owens basically is saying the same thing, which is bring it on. I want the discovery. I want to depose them. So and this is what lawsuits are, right? They're kind of like a game of chicken. They're two people running full speed, confidence at each other, and we'll see who flinches first. Candace alleges that Brigitte Macron filed this lawsuit for some PR reason. I assure you, that would be the most bonehead thing to do. This case is going to be so much. It's sort of expanded this coverage 100-fold, right? I didn't want to cover Candace's claims earlier, but now that it's going through the court system, it's going to be pretty interesting. It's going to take a long time to break this all down. So there's a lot of claims that Candace made here. We're not going to be able to cover all of them right now, but here's what Candace said way back actually in January about her correspondence with Brigitte Macron's legal team and how they weren't exactly denying things.
While refusing to just plainly state that Brigitte Macron, the current First Lady of France, was indeed born a woman, they used all sorts of tricky language to suggest that they could sue me for defamation over minor errors that I made in my reporting. Okay, essentially, they were not addressing the substance of the claim. Brigitte Macron was born a biological male, but instead attacking things like, you said in an earlier report that a picture from Brigitte's communion was recolorized. This is false. This reporting has caused Brigitte to have mental anguish.
So when you listen to Candace Owens, and again, this is just me coming at this from someone who hasn't consumed much of Candace Owens, and I certainly haven't consumed anything of Brigitte Macron, right? But when you listen to Candace Owens, she's very convincing in the way she puts this forward, saying, I asked them all these questions, they didn't answer them. In their court document, in their defamation suit, they say they responded to every single claim Candace asked with evidence. So I'm left to say some, third-rate, Timu, Dax Shepard, I'm asked to say, who's telling the truth here? And this way it has to go through the court system, because when Candace Owens shares this, you assume it's her Bible. You assume this is the truth. She's telling us she wouldn't lie. I'm not saying Candace Owens is lying. I'm just saying I'm going to need to see the evidence coming from both sides. And of course, that's all that's going to play out. So by the way, if you enjoy talking about this stuff, maybe at work or wherever you are, we live stream daily privately on our Patreon channel, patreon.com/Dave Neal. And we also have a chat room dedicated just for this, where people are sharing YouTube videos. We've got someone sharing, what doctors are saying, what's going on. People kind of on all sides of this. And the only thing I ask on the Patreon is no fighting. That's all I ask, is it's like a private community, $5 a month. It gets rid of all the trolls, and people can have very, honest, I think earnest conversations. Patreon.com/Dave Neal, link in the bio. So let's continue. I'm going to read some excerpts of what we have in this 200 plus page document that is alleging defamation. This is from Brigitte Macron. Candace Owens published the series and related Twitter posts with reckless disregard for the truth. Owens was repeatedly presented with credible, verifiable evidence disproving her claims, including documentation, public records, and direct outreach from the Macrons. Instead of correcting the record, she doubled down. At the time, Mrs. Macron had won French defamation claims against others who pushed these same baseless theories, underscoring both their falsity and defamatory sting. Owens knew this, yet Owens, fully aware of the truth, has not only declined to retract her statements, but has actively expanded on them. So this is where you have to get tricky, right? They said at the time Mrs. Macron won French defamation. That was overturned on appeal. I'm going to explain to you why that was overturned on appeal in a moment. In September of 2024, a French court held that Ray and Roy defamed Mrs. Macron for spreading false rumors that Mrs. Macron was born Jean-Michel Trogneux and later stole the identity of Brigitte Trogneux. The defamation suit confirmed that Ray's and Roy's claims that all documents related to the Macrons' birth, marriage, divorce, and childbearing were forged to conceal her actual sex were false. Jean-Michel participated in the trial. Ray and Roy were fined euros, in order to pay 8,000 euros to Mrs. Macron and 5,000 euros to her brother in civil damages. Again, not much money. Seems to be, I'm sure they spent a hell of a lot more in legal fees. After multiple victories against Ray and Roy at home in France, the Macrons thought these false claims had been put to bed. But as discussed below, Owens turned this flame into a fire. So here's what ChatGPT has to say. Again, don't take it, it gets it wrong, but I think they do a pretty good job of explaining it. So they released a 4-hour video claiming that Brigitte Macron was born as a man named Jean-Michel Trogneux and participated in a cover-up involving her family history. Brigitte Macron and her brother filed a libel defamation lawsuit in France. In September of 2023, a lower court convicted the women and ordered them to pay damages. Appeal court decision. So this is what, people that believe Candace Owens' side, they say, listen, how come other people haven't won their defamation case? If it's true, if Brigitte Macron was born a woman, wouldn't she have won defamation? I mean, it's an honest question, but it's a little bit more complicated than that. On July 10th, 2025, so just a few weeks ago, the Paris Court of Appeals overturned the previous conviction and acquitted Ray and Roy of all 18 disputed counts. The appeals court ruled that the statements were made in good faith. They did not meet the strict criteria for defamation under French law. Instead, they were classified as opinion, rumor, or speculation rather than false statements causing reputational harm. Importantly, the court did not validate the conspiracy theory. It simply determined that the allegations didn't legally qualify as defamation and therefore were protected as free speech under the law. See, one aspect of French law is that it is not considered defamatory to call somebody, the wrong gender. In its essence, it wouldn't be. It's really the conspiracy that comes with that, right? So they talk about the false statements implying wrongdoing, the mismatch with legal definition of defamation, and all of the other sort of routes that were taken for this appeal to be won here. So again, it's disingenuous just to say, well, they won. Brigitte Macron lost her defamation suit. That's disingenuous. Did Brigitte Macron inform them of all of the proof that she had that she was a woman versus did she do that to Candace? That's what we don't really know. They claim they have done all that. The Macrons, through their counsel, sent a detailed retraction demand letter to Owens via email on December 3rd. The December retraction demand explained the falsity of Owens' defamatory statements and included an abundance of evidence that Mrs. Macron was born a woman named Brigitte Trogneux, that she was not a blood relative of President Macron, and that the Macrons were not being controlled or blackmailed by any group of people. Owens did not respond to the December 3rd email. Owens then repeatedly ignored multiple additional attempts by the Macrons to engage. And again, this would all be proven through, this is why when you deliver something, you have carrier service. This is why you have signed letters. This is to make sure, you can say whether or not something was sent. So was this, that's why when someone is served, are you Candace Owens? You've been served. That's why you do stuff like this, to make sure there's no funny business. And I'm not accusing Candace Owens of that. I'm just saying they say they made attempts to engage. The Macron sent a follow-up email on December 18th, which went unanswered. On January 8th, the Macrons contacted Owens' former legal counsel to facilitate communication, but received no response. Next, the Macrons attempted to personally serve the December retraction demand on January 9th, but were first ignored, then blocked by Owens' counsel, who ultimately agreed to accept service by email. The December retraction demand explicitly denied each of Owens' claims and presented evidence that conclusively disproved them. So here's where I'm curious. Candace says, why wouldn't they just answer my questions? They're saying they've denied all of these claims. So they're saying they have answered the questions. Here is what they sent Candace. Carnet Mondant. Henri, Jean-Claude, Marie-Yvonne, Monique et Jean-Michel Trogneau ont la grande joie de vous annoncer la naissance de leur petite sœur Brigitte Amiens, Première rue de l'Ombre, right? Which is saying Anne-Marie, Jean-Claude, Marie-Yvonne, Monique, et Jean-Michel Trogneau have the grand joy of announcing we have the grand joy of announcing to you the birth of our little sister, Brigitte. So this exists. As far as do we have a hard copy of this, I guess Candace Owens also has a claim that maybe Brigitte existed, but the current Brigitte stole the identity. These are the types of questions Candace poses. And I think you're allowed to ask these questions. That's not what's defamatory. We'll get to that in a second. The December retraction demand explicitly stated that Mrs. Macron is the biological mother of her 3 children, proving that she was born as woman and has not engaged in identity theft. So this was the question that Candace Owens had asked before, which was to say, why hasn't she just said she was born a woman? Why hasn't she made that claim? And we see in this defamation suit here that she's saying she has said this. In her earlier reporting, Owens claimed that Mrs. Macron fathered her 3 children with Brigitte Ozier, whom she falsely claimed was the niece of Jean-Louis Ozier, the uncle of Mrs. Macron's late ex-husband. She accused Jean-Louis of forging the children's birth certificates to hide Mrs. Macron's secret. This is the same Jean-Louis whom she claimed was in the wedding photo of Mrs. Macron and her first husband, and who has successfully sued Ray and Roy for defamation. Owens did not repeat these claims in the series, but she has never retracted the prior false claims. Again, if this thing goes to trial, the amount of poster boards with strings and it is going to be insanity, because you got to read that 10 times to understand what the hell's going on here. And by all means, like I said before, Candace presented a very alluring story about how come there's only one photo of this guy? How come there's not, there's a lot of questions like that. And, I understand in today's world, you think there's a digital footstep everywhere. But, like take my mom, for example. She doesn't have she has one photo online, right? She hates the internet. She wants nothing to do with it. My stepdad's got 0 online footprint. He does not exist unless you find a shoebox full of photos in my basement. You know what I mean? Again, not to say, but, if they come from some sort of elite family, wouldn't they have photos? I don't know. So I understand. I totally have grace and understanding of the people that say, watch Candace's docuseries. It's going to blow your mind. Again, I'm not done. I'm not offering a judgment. I'm just saying I've got grace for the people that think there's a story here. I want those same people to have grace for me as I'm trying to get Brigitte's side. All right? So if we're going to do this, if we're going to play this game and be in the sandbox here, we have to pause on judgment of each other and get this thing to the finish line. Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense? Or else, what are we even doing here? Well, you're on that side, you're on this side. I don't play that. I didn't play that game with Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard. I don't like to play that game. I like to look at the evidence because, we'll have a long time to cover this. So anyway, it continues. And again, let me know, hit the subscribe button if you would like me to further read this in its entirety. I think it's pretty interesting. Will Candace Owens come back and try to refute this publicly, or was she just she's going to have to respond to this in the court. When Owens realized her claims about Mrs. Macron's children, that Brigitte Macron fathered her children with the fictitious Brigitte Ozier could not possibly be true, she dropped them, offering no alternative explanation, just a gaping hole. She counted on her audience being too captivated or too unquestioning to notice the gap, let alone call her out on it. The reason is clear. Any theory that claims Mrs. Macron is not the mother of her children recklessly disregards the striking resemblances between her and her daughters. So then they shared the photo of Brigitte Macron with her daughters. Now, this is the first photo I'm seeing of Brigitte Macron's daughters. As far as Candace was concerned, she said there was only really one of Brigitte Macron's offspring that was publicly speaking, so I don't know for sure. But I also don't live in a world where this offers proof either. Yes, this is a striking resemblance, but also Candace provided photos that were also a resemblance. The way this thing gets settled is, and I hate to say it sounds so icky, but Brigitte Macron submits a blood sample, right? Isn't that the way this thing gets settled? I mean, that's the beginning, is to show not just a birth certificate and all that, but just show the science. And again, it sounds so icky to say that, because who am I to demand someone share their own gender? But they entered this lawsuit, so they're going to have to prove it. That's really kind of what it comes down to. Unless I'm wrong, in which case let me know. So we already covered Natasha Ray and Amandine Roy and their defamation suit. But the question has been asked, why hasn't Candace Owens' main source, Javier Poussard, why hasn't he been sued for defamation? And this is interesting. Again, this comes from ChatGPT. A French journalist and author of the far-right newsletter Faits and Documents originated many elements of the conspiracy theory. However, unlike Ray and Roy, he has not made specific factual errors in his reporting. Sources suggest that is likely why he has not been sued. He was never convicted in the French cases filed by Macron. As Candace Owens and others have noted, if you look at the actual lawsuit, Poussard was not sued because his work was thorough and lacked the small mistakes that triggered legal action against others. Now, I would argue that the small mistakes don't necessarily mean that they're insignificant. The question's going to become, was Candace Owens as careful? Now, if you're just writing a book, you have an editor look at it, you go over all of the allegations, you make sure you speak with the allegedly versus saying things as fact. It makes a big difference, allegedly versus saying something as fact. So did Candace Owens say things as fact? If so, she would kind of be putting a greater spotlight on herself as a journalist, saying this is what I found out to be true versus this is my opinion. During episode 6, Owens made the following specific false and defamatory claim. I think a year from now, most of the world will be awakened to the fact that what I said 1 year ago is true. I believe that Emmanuel Macron is a homosexual man that was groomed from his youth. I believe the individual who groomed him is now his wife. I believe that his wife was born Jean-Michel Trogneau and transitioned in his early 30s. And I believe that the entire state is colluding to protect the secret. And like I said, I would stake my entire professional career on all of those points. Now, again, not an expert. My belief here is that Candace Owens, in this paragraph, is saying it's my belief, and she's protected about having those beliefs. I guess the question with the court is, are you allowed to have those beliefs after someone provided you evidence otherwise? Someone could say, here's evidence that the moon is a sphere. And you might say, well, I still believe it's flat. It's not illegal to believe the moon is flat. You're just not going to get invited to my Thanksgiving dinner. Or maybe you will. I don't know. It could be fun. Have a couple edibles and talk about your theories. So I don't believe anything she said here was defamatory, but it's specifically moments like this where, and again, maybe this is Candace's social media person, but the literal title is Brigitte Macron is a man. The title isn't, I believe Brigitte Macron is a man. And that's where it gets kind of dangerous.
It is time for you to wake up. So we will start from the top here with a photo of Brigitte Macron. Real name, Jean-Michel Trogneau. That person that you are looking at on the right is not a woman.
Okay, and again, she, what's tough with me, and if you've watched my content so far, hopefully you can trust that I'm trying my best here. But what's tough with me is this. Candace Owens, she's considers herself a person of faith, a Christian woman, right? And when I look at Christianity, the basic tenet, right, is love God and love your neighbor. Love your neighbor as yourself. And I struggle with Candace Owens here, having such an issue with someone else's chosen way to live. Now, hold on a second. if we're going to talk about, it's a completely separate argument whether Brigitte Macron was born a man or not, versus Brigitte Macron being 39, according to the information I was able to look up, starting to date a 14 or 15-year-old, groom him. Obviously, that is not legal. You cannot consent at that age, and that's a whole separate set of issues. The question I've continued to struggle with is, since they're still married, since they're living their life, since this was decades ago, how does this harm society now? And if it's not harming society now, why do we care what they're doing? That's a question I haven't really been provided a great answer with, but I do struggle with Candace Owens. A lot of people have said this story is not about the trans issue, it's about all of the other things. But how come the trans issue is the center point? How come it's the marketing? How come it's the poster? How come it's all of that? If Brigitte transitioned in her 30s, I say, if you're an adult, do what you want with your body. If you want to transition, that's the world I live in. Who am I to judge what somebody else wants to do with their body? If you want to get into a conversation about, hormones and stuff for kids, that's a different conversation. And again, maybe they cover this the last 25% of the docuseries I haven't seen yet. Give me time. We're going to get into it. But these are the types of questions I'm going to be asking, which is to say, I understand why people don't want to cover this because it feels icky. I didn't want to check it out because it felt icky. And after watching it, even though a whole lot of new people are coming to my channel, you have to understand my belief. And again, I'm trying to come at this with as much of an open mind as possible. My belief is I don't see the evidence for Candace to want to stake her whole career on this. I really don't yet. But what we're going to have to see now is all of this evidence that Brigitte Macron says she has, they're entering it in their defamation suit. So it's there. Hit the subscribe button, and we'll make a time this week to read this, maybe one of these afternoons. It'll be a lot. I mean, I'm going to have to drink a few Celsius. It's going to be a lot to get through. But I'll call in the defamation specialists so we can discuss this, because in the end, it will set a precedent for how people combat conspiracy theories. I did find it interesting that Candace Owens began to make the play where she jockeyed herself as the victim, and this felt like Candace Owens realized she was kind of on the defensive. That being the moment when Candace Owens says, "Are we really going to have the first lady of a major country start to sue journalists?" And it's like, well, the lawsuits are there to protect people from defamation. So this is why it plays out in court. Candace Owens isn't some, person making 40 grand at the local Tribune. She's a multi-millionaire. I mean, she might be worth more than the Macrons. I have no idea. Maybe she doesn't have as much power as them policy-wise, but she is a massive, massive entity. So for her to say, well, we're really going to start suing journalists, it's like, you knew before you started this thing, you had to cross your T's and dot your I's. Did she do that? These are the questions we're asking now. And again, no dog in the fight. We'll see how it all plays out. No hate towards Candace. But this is the game she's now entering herself in. They're calling her bluff. They're taking her to court. We'll be here to cover it. All right. If you like this content, I do a podcast twice a day. Every morning, every afternoon, I cover pop culture and I cover populist politics. That being the things I believe in, which is we should all have health care. We shouldn't be getting robbed by insurance companies. We should allow our moms, this is the most pro-family thing you're going to hear, we should allow our moms to have at least a year of paid family leave, right? We should be taxing the billionaires more so that we could provide for a country where the middle class doesn't feel like they're going to go broke with one $400 emergency payment. These are the populist things I talk about. If any of this, and I should say the last thing is getting money out of politics, but if any of this is value to you or something where you say, well, maybe we like your thoughts and opinions on this, you can go check out the Rush Hour podcast. You can listen to it anywhere you listen to podcasts, Apple, Spotify, wherever, or you can check it out here on the Rush Hour podcast playlist, which is on this YouTube channel every morning, every afternoon. We'll see you then. Thanks so much for checking me out. For all the new people, I really appreciate you giving me a chance. Let's have some grace for each other as we figure it out. We'll see you this afternoon.